Okay, now it went to a new file. Okay. All things are done for God's glory, is what it says. Um, everything is for God's glory. If I'm not mistaken, that's what the Bible says. Everything, this entire thing is for God's glory. And you're like, well, that's like selfish. And it's like, well, but God's selfishness is all loving, like pervasive, all loving, all kindness, all, providence, all provision, all protection, all everything. Like, and, it says that the glory and the riches to come will be better, or not to be compared with the sufferings of this life. And so I don't know, it is kind of a paradox. There's another message called paradox. There's several of them. Paradox. And I think that that's something that trips people up, especially intellectuals and the wise of the world. These paradox, or seeming paradoxes. And I think that's understandable. And I don't know, so I don't know the answer. I believe that, if faith is real, and God's got me anchored in, then it'll just prove itself out. God will prove himself out, and the experience will prove itself. Because me, I'm a flawed, weak human in this estate, in this corrupt estate, in my needy, weak flesh and everything. I've already failed thousands of times, so you know. So I've always counted on that. And it's a difficult thing, right? So what do we do? I don't know. I don't quite get it. How far do we let it go? Do you take the vaccine when you know it's poison? That's kind of what I was saying earlier. It's like you're not supposed to tempt God, like, but if you need it for your job, you're like, it's poison, and who knows what it is. Like if it's gene editing, which, well, it is, and it's like altering your DNA and killing people. Like, are you supposed to take that because it's for your job? Like, I don't know. I want to know. Are there people in my church who are, getting blood clots, or any of them die suddenly or anything? Ew, I don't know. I haven't been in touch with any of them. But like, if it is, it'll be just like the example of the little girl drinking poison, right? The ones who die, well, they'll have an answer. Well, it was their time, or so I don't know. But maybe none of them are sick. Maybe they took the vaccine. Maybe some of them didn't. I don't know. I would say probably a mixture. But I would be curious to know if they've been having sickness and death from vaccinations, from for those that have taken it. Because if they have, then to me it'd be sort of like the same thing. Like, once again, like that would be, I guess, like one of the fatal flaws. The mankind overlord insertion into all the other truths would be to, like, just follow the authority, do what it tells you. Um, yeah, it's a tough one. It's a tough one. With everything that's happened in history, we should know better, man. We should know better, but constantly the arrogance and pride of people is probably just staggering, right? Because we feel like, especially in this modern day, we all seem to think that we've discovered everything for the first time, and we know everything newer, better, more thoroughly, and whatever than they ever knew in the past. But I think that's super arrogant and just prideful, and I don't think it's true. You know, there's nothing new under the sun. Vanity of vanities, all is vanity. These concepts, which are in the Bible and discussed at pretty great length. I think they're true. Um, I think the way that we think we're so progressed and so enlightened and intelligent, I won't, I think for a large degree, partly there is an awakening. I do believe in the awakening, and, the apocalypse, all things will be revealed in the end. So there is that. But in the, you know, what, exoteric, in the worldly public sphere, all in these things, um, in that sphere, in that realm, I think it's the opposite. That people are just confused and led astray in a lot of these intellectual meanderings and, prideful modern musings and whatever. Um, so it's part of, like, the sort of paradoxical nature again of things. And you know, we have more information at our fingertips than ever, but people are like more lost than ever in many senses, because it makes, it makes sense when you're closer to death, when you're closer to life and death and love and hate and these real struggles, and everything's really difficult like in the older days. um I think what's true will be a lot more true, and what's false will be much more false, because you'll just see it so much clearer, right? Yeah. And that brings me right back again. So today, of like, why, who's awake, who was aware from the scamdemic, who knew that the masking was a ritual, who didn't wear them, who went against the vaccines, the mandates, who protested, who stood out, uh, and went into stores and challenged people and got in arguments or tried to defend themselves. Who did these things and why? What was it about them? And I lost the thought I was going to say about who. But it's just, just the nature that it's because, to me, the people that are in those positions, and it's very plain to see if you go into the weekly protests here in Toronto, Ontario, Canada, the weekly protests, and there are protests throughout, the province and the country, I'm sure, but the one here in Toronto, yeah, I would say, and don't mean to offend anybody, but it's kind of a group of yahoos. It's a group of fringe people. Not all, but a lot of it is, and yeah, people who like to dance in the street. Not all of them, certainly. I mean, that's a small group, really. But like, those are the weekly regulars who are some of the, I think, strongest, most aware, awake people and bold people in the movements. And I would say that, like, people like that, speaking of myself, first and foremost, are people who, and I didn't even have that hard of a life. I don't know, like, it's just like a weird thing. And um it's more like an emotional, mental, whatever. But I talk more about that in other videos, what happened to me. But just that we had suffering. Many of these people had difficult childhoods, painful childhoods. That's the part, is I think that pain and suffering is one of the things, because when you've been abused, when you've been gaslit, when you've been through deep personal pain and suffering at your heart level, because there was chaos in your family, your mother, your father, didn't love you or beat you or different things like this. And I think you have to also be exposed to the truth, or there's some combination there. But those sufferings, they make you end up growing up, and you're already skeptical, right? And you're very critical of like everything, especially other people. Um, and it can produce this effect that there are people like me and whatever, who see the abuses and the tortures and the rituals and the symbolisms and all these things. We see it so much more clearly, if at all, if the other people even see it at all, right? um and some of us see it so clearly that it's hard to avoid, it's difficult to avoid, and it's painful, right? For someone like me, it's really difficult to just like live a normal life, because it's like inescapable and it's unavoidable in my conversation, it's unavoidable in my life. It's a, I have to confront it, and that's only progressed, and that's only gotten worse, especially, obviously, it's at the forefront the last few years for me and for many people. And like, so let's say that there were some big protests, where I was personally at, and I know that there's been around the world and in Canada and everything, where there's been thousands of people. And some of the bigger ones I was in here, it's hard to say with the estimates, but maybe 10, 12,000 people. I don't know, which is not that big. Canada's kind of pathetic, although our population's pretty low, but still it's pathetic, uh, for how many people showed up. But those were bigger protests for us, and I met many people in those protests, because normally we have like we had hundreds, and nowadays, last year, we got like less than 100. Sometimes it's like 30 people or whatever. And But when there was thousands, most of those people were actually well-adjusted people, professionals, careers, business holders, many productive whatever members of society. And so it shows that they are awake or prepared or something on some level, because they came to some protests. Some of them might have came to just one or a few of the biggest ones. Um, and I'm sure that that was not the extent of what they did. I'm sure many of those people, thousands of people at our protests and at the bigger ones around Canada, I'm sure many of those people sent emails to local politicians and business owners, and have conversations with their neighbors to some degree. I'm sure many of them, depending on, we know how it works, right? If you have some professional career or you work for the government or whatever, your school teacher, a lot of these people, regardless of how awake they are, um, usually it's to a lesser degree. It's not an insult, but usually it's to a lesser degree. But they often have to protect. They don't have to, but they want to protect their jobs, their careers, their fortunes, their livelihoods, their families, their houses. And I understand that, guys. I'm not saying it's easy to throw everything away. And I don't know if that's what you have to do or whatever. But I think most of those people take those routes. Who knows how many of those people who came out to those anti-mask rallies, um, how many of them were actually wearing the masks in their day-to-day life, going to work, going to school, out on public transit, maybe just walking down the street in a sunny day. Like, how many of them were wearing the masks on a regular basis? I think a lot of them. I think a lot of them did. Um, I'm sure some of them probably didn't, and some of them took the vaccine. How many? I don't know, but probably many of them. Um, and maybe multiple doses even or whatever. So it just goes to show you the level. The level. I mean, in Canada, it's pretty bad. It's a scant few people who are really, strong against these things. And why? Like I'm saying, those people, many of them, most of those people are well-adjusted, healthy people that I'm envious of in those regards. Um, it's not like true envy, but kind of like I wish I had that, but I don't, right? And so that's why I'm not bragging about myself at all, like, 'cause it's just pain and suffering. You think like Moses in the wilderness or Jesus in the wilderness or all these prophets, that many of them went through some incredible trials, like Paul the apostle, he was exiled to an island and in prison and all these things. They suffered a lot to be in that position and to be used of God in such a strong, powerful way through suffering. It's tempered like tempering on a sword. It has to be heated up and beaten and beaten and tempered, and it produces the most glorious, shining, sharp instrument and implement of God to do work for others' benefit, for other humans' benefit, and for God's benefit. And it's all for the benefit of all, right? And that's the way it is, guys. That's just the way it is. And so I think that's why, like, a priest class, an oracle class, these types of people, these spiritual advisors, these people are someone to be revered, because to get to be in those positions, they suffer. They suffer for it. And that's why to me, you would give reverence and homage and whatnot. Uh, it's supposed to be to even just your everyday pastor, but and some of those deserve some credit on that level as well. But the people who are really seers, visionaries, um, you know, priestly types, to spread these messages and whatever, those ones suffer for it, guys. They suffer for it. And so, you know, it's just to have that understanding of that. It's not like you're not like, oh, you're such a special person, but if you understand that they're being used by God to give you a message and to help others and whatnot, then I think, and they have to suffer for it. then I think you can just have that understanding, that compassion, that reverence, and its importance. You understand the importance, and everyone has their role. So it's not about placing certain people over others, because having seers and advisors and priests, well, what good is it if there's no assembly, if there's no doorman, if there's no ushers or people to serve tea in the back? Like all that stuff is important. It's so important. And so none of that is to be diminished. None of it. Every position is to be celebrated and important and even necessary, for the fruition, for the full manifestation of the the body of Christ, of the body of the believers, of the awakened truthers. Um, Everyone has to be there. Uh, Otherwise, there's going to be weak links. There's going to be frayed edges. There's going to be all these things. So everyone gets their dues and their glory and their for their role, and it is what it is. So, well, I've really spanned a gamut of topics in this one. Super long, but this is life, Aaron. I'm kind of like preaching a sermon here, basically. I mean, that's why I'm a long-winded person. Really, everything turns into like a sermon, and I know that my I know someone who would call me like a maybe a false preacher, a grandstander or whatever, but I don't think that I am. You tell me. I shall not judge myself on it. I'm just saying what I think. And, praise be to God and to the truth and to love and everything that is good. And I want that for everyone in the world. So, and forgive me, God, and those I've hurt for the wrongs I've done. Well, what I think that might be about it, guys. Okay. Good night. God bless you. Yeah, I think it's getting pretty late here, so bye-bye.